Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a viewer's reel. It's Jack's reel. It's a TR100. It's a Shimano Triton reel. It's a small frame chassis, kind of lines up with about the size of an Abu. In nature, it's a 5500 Abu. Graphite side plate, single ball bearing, line guide, kind of reel. Nice for casting and general inshore type fishing. And we're going to go take it apart and service it. I'll show you how it comes apart, what to look for when you service the reels, and how to put them back together again to last a long time. So Shimano makes a nice product. These reels stood the test of time. They're not terribly expensive on the used market. From a series standpoint, they've been around for quite a while now. I think the first Triton started showing up in the 1980s, and there's a market for the used reel, and there's a lot of people that enjoy this reel. So we're going to start by taking the handle off first. I'll tell you at this point some of the things that are kind of standard, right? We use the parts basket, parts tray, and over on my left here, and that's just the bottom of a milk jug. You know, you can use magnetic trays, you can use all kinds of things. It just serves me to use those. They're kind of disposable. I don't have to clean them. When I get enough grease and gunk and dirt in there, then it's time to swap it out, put that in the recycle bin, and go for another one. So we're taking off the star adjuster. Here's a ball bearing in here. And now we can remove the side plate, which is where all the action is happening. And those have Phillips head screws, so you want to take them out. And what I like to do when I don't know the reel that well, or as just a general practice, I like to take all the screws out, make sure that they're all the same size. If there's a shorter one or a longer one, I like to note the location of that, so that when I go back to reassemble, I put them in the right spaces. That's particularly true on Penn reels, the Long Beaches and the like. They have shorter screws on the reel seat, and it's worth noting. You can also note by way of a schematic. You can go check the parts and the locations. I'll tell you pretty quickly whether you're right or wrong with those. Okay, so that's what I thought. Those two in the middle come out as well. Okay, so we have 4 long ones. They're on the outer rim. We have 2 shorter ones on the inner. Those are holding the springs in on the assembly. And then we can remove the top. But before I do that, now that I notice the locations of these, I'm going to pull these screws and put them into the parts tray so that I don't knock anything off my table. With that done, then we can remove the tray. Very clean reel inside. As I would probably guess, the only service really required here is that this hasn't been lubricated in a while. You can't see any any indication of grease or that at all. So let's go ahead and just do the proper lubrication on this. So we're going to pull the stack. Here's that ball bearing I was referring to. The ball bearing has an open side on it here. That's the shim next. Sits on the bearing. And then we have a series of tension washers. Now these tension washers are not flat. They have a move in it, so you just want to make sure that you know which way they go. They can go side to side. They can go in kind of a spooning position, which is what these two on top and bottom are. And they can go opposite, which is how you have the space in here. So just notice that stack as they came off. These are tension washers that help you adjust the tension of the drag setting itself, the adjuster knob. So if you want more tension, you can reverse those and have them all go face to face with more spaces. If you want less, you can spoon them all together. Okay, with that then, I always tell folks, if you don't know how the reel comes apart, if you didn't get the schematic, take a picture. And this would be an ideal time to take a picture to show you where the springs are, the yoke, the gear for the spool, the main gear, the drag washer locations, etc. So go take that picture now if you don't have it. I'm going to lay the drag stack out. We have a click mechanism and an anti-reverse dog that sits on the post here. The anti-reverse dog is a spring on the collar here. And all I'm doing is removing these parts right now so that we can come back and lubricate the other pieces. So let's just, I'm just going to lay these out. There's no need for me to put these into the parts tray because it's not a very complicated structure. And all I want to do is make sure that we get a little bit of grease on each. So I'm going to use a Penn grease for this. It's a blue grease, the Penn Precision Reel Grease. Anybody's reel grease will do, but make sure it's fishing reel grease. And I'm just going to put a little bit on the moving parts. I'm going to pull that last sliding assembly here. This is the free spool release up top here. And you can tell it just rides on the back of the frame, so I just want to get a little bit of grease under the frame there so that it rides easier. And just go put that right back into place there. We got the yoke, and again, these look like new internal pieces and parts here. Absolutely no greasing going on there at all, so let's make sure that they get their share to help them extend the life and ride smoothly. You want to make sure you remember which side went where. So this side goes into the spool. There's a little shoulder there, and the side that the main gear turns is here. It's the opposite if you were looking at the yoke and gear on a Penn reel, for example. The shoulder would sit out because you have a reverse view of the spool. Okay, those can go back in. This is the trip mechanism. This helps trip the reel, and it's the anti-reverse. This sits on a shoulder on the pinion gear, and you have to make sure that you have it on the shoulder. If it's not on the shoulder, you won't get the proper stop. And we've got that set up right. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on the anti-reverse dog. I don't want to put grease on that because that could bog the performance over time. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the back pinion shaft, even though that's not really required. We're going to turn our attention then to restoring the reel the way we got it, which means you put those two springs back on the yoke, and then we're going to come over here and we're going to deal with the washers. Now the washers are fabric, so they get drag grease. And I use a Cal's Universal Drag Grease for this. These don't appear to have any wear, or a lot of wear. So I'm just going to grab this one. See if we can't work that out without too much of an issue there. There we go. Just you have to be careful with these. You don't want to rip them up if they're not needed. These have a lot of life left on them, so there's no sense in trying to buy the parts for them. So you notice I put the drag grease on, rubbed it in with my gloved hand. The back of the gear is clean, so we're just going to go ahead and reinstall that. And then these are in the order that you see them flopped out here. There's a metal washer that comes on next. And actually, we can go right ahead and put this on the drag stack. This is a hard fabric washer that doesn't require anything. It's just a spacer between the main gear. You want to seat your main gear on the spool lever. You're going to come on now and just make sure these are clean. You don't have to lube metal washers. And we have the hard washers up next. Then we have the eared washer. I'll take that other. So it looks like we have a little bit of compression. That's it. They're not stuck, but a little bit of compression, probably because the grease dried on the washers. So that's up next. There's two ears. They belong in those eared cups on the side. Again, we'll put a little bit of the Cal's Universal Drag Grease on the washer, rub it in to make sure we have a nice even distribution. That one comes in. Top washer goes on. We have those feathered stacks, the tension washers. shim. That closes off the back. Now we're going to flood this bearing with Reel X. It's a fishing reel oil. Sure that gets a nice good drink. Again, if there's anything to be said about this reel, it looks that it's just dry. You can also put a little bit of oil on the eccentric here, just because this reel is so dry. The eccentric helps move the anti-reverse lever up and down. We're set up with that. We're set up with the slot for the eccentric. We can put a little bit of blue grease back on the face side of that jack. The jack is the transition piece that goes between them. And put a little bit there just for some additional slip on the eccentric. And then all we have to do is line our case up. And you just heard it come in. So we had the 4 long ones, but I like to put the 2 short ones in first just because we've got the springs holding there. So let's go ahead and do that. Again, these are Phillips head screws. So you can see these reels are relatively simple to service. If you need parts, you can get the parts still for these, the drag washers. You can get the drag washers, I believe 2 of the sources is e-replacement parts or e-replacementparts.com, which handles a lot of Shimano stuff. I also believe in Canada you have Mike's Reel Repair. You can go to the Shimano website and they'll actually show you a listing of the folks that are their regional repair centers and where you can get parts. You can also get the drags at online services like Smooth Drag, and I'm not sure, I'm going to guess that there's an upgrade available to Carbonex drags here. So if you wanted to get those, I think that Smooth Drag would be a source for those, and I'm sure there's others out there as well that can provide those pieces and parts for you. So this is an exercise to show you relatively how simple it is to do some of these reels, and a way to encourage you to do the reel service at least once a year. You can either do it at the beginning of the season, at the end of the season. I like to do it at the end of the season because if you're going to store a reel, it means that it's been serviced in oil and it doesn't risk anything over the course of the downtime period there. Here's your other spacer for the front side of the bearing. Did the one in the back there, and now we can put the star adjuster knob on. And just give it a spin here, make sure that that's working right. So the mechanicals are right now. There's just a couple other things to do, but let's finish off by putting the handle on. Putting that 10mm nut back on there. So you can see that the reel is a nice compact form. It's kind of a proven technology inside, and it's one that with the right service is durable and is going to last. These Shimanos have a good reputation for that. So if you see one, I think you can probably pick them up online now for under $40 US, and they're a good investment, particularly if this is the type of fishing you do near shore or inshore. All right, just put that nut cap on, the holder cap. Grab that screw. And then we'll just go over the back side of the reel and make sure that the spool is taken care of on the back end. Okay, so there's 4 screws back here as well. We're going to go take those off. Now this is a solid graphite frame, so you couldn't service the back end of this reel by taking the gear side plate off. You saw that when we were lubricating the free spool jack and eccentric, and that they were resting on that back side plate there. So there's no way to go and service this side of it that way. So you just want to come over and again do the same thing that we did on the other side. Make sure that the pieces and parts, the screws, are the same length, and if you notice that there's one that's a shorter length, then make sure that you go and put that back where it came from. Not much going on here, but this is the same thing, isn't it, that we saw on the other side. Almost no grease whatsoever. It almost looks like this was somehow pressure washed or something and pushed all the grease off. So our service here is get it onto the drive gear from the spool. That drive gear, the small gear, is going to drive the big outside of the plastic idler gear. I think that's what it's called, the idler gear. It's a transition gear. I don't know what the exact name of it is. Somebody will tell me. So just get some grease into those teeth there and check all those teeth. Make sure that they're all in place and not chipped. This is the number one place where a level line reel of this type will fail. It will fail because the plastic teeth chipped out. So just get that done, and you don't. If you got the grease on the two sides, you don't need to put the grease onto the metal piece here that drives the worm gear. This one's kind of easy. Shimano's on the bottom, so just line it up accordingly, and just go put those 4 screws back in. Then we have one more service, which is the worm gear and line guide assembly. And you can see in a matter of 15 minutes or so you can service this reel, so there's no real reason to neglect to service this particular reel. And you can do it yourself. You don't have to wait for a trip to the shop or something. You can take it apart on the afternoon or an evening and get it back to go fishing the next morning. So I like them. I like these reels a lot. I like the Abu that I showed you earlier, and again, they're kind of in the same class. I guess if you were looking at a pen, it would probably be like a Pen 9 type of a reel, maybe the 210, something like that, the smaller frame. Oh, I'm sorry, Pen 10, not the 210. 210 would be the bigger version with the ball bearings of the 209. Okay, last one then, we just want to crank this over to the side so we can get to the pawl cover. The pawl is a little forked cylinder, and you just want to put a drop of oil in there. You can see it's sitting in there. You don't have to take it out if it's working fine. Just put a drop of oil in there to keep that moving freely. And watch this one. When you go to put it back, it's a plastic cap. So if you over tighten this one, if you misthread it, if you wrench it, if you do any of that stuff, you risk breaking this cap. It's not as durable as some of the metal ones. With that working then, last one is just a squirt on the worm gear itself with the reel oil. And we're done. Now, Jack asked me to take the line off of this one before I returned it to him. We'll go do that. But feature and function-wise, mechanisms, this is the way it goes. If you wanted a little bit less tension on there, you can work this this tension cap here. You can back it out, and that'll, well, it's going to free spool. That'll allow the spool to turn more freely. If you want a little bit more tension, just crank it in, and it'll be a little bit more difficult to turn. So that's the Triton 100G. Nice reel, well priced in the used market, easy to service, and if you have one of those, you now know how to service it. If you're interested in buying one, you now know what the reel is made of. So with that, I'm going to thank you for viewing. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you like it, please indicate so. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Thank you.